LightCasting. Hi, sweet souls. Welcome to I'm Awake, Now What? A podcast investigating the intersectionality of spirituality, healing, and personal development. I'm your host, Krista Xiomara. Rack up some good karma by leaving a 5-star rating, and write a review if you're enjoying the show, and tell your friends about it. This week I sit down to speak with Margot Jones, better known as MJ, who is an artist, creative, writer, and mother. We discuss how tarot became her purpose after coming through a challenging period in her life. MJ walks us through what tarot is and how it can be used. She shares her creative process in building a new deck and the intricate way she goes about creating each card with the reader in mind. She leaves the audience with some words of wisdom to help support the listeners on their journey towards awakening and homecoming. Hey MJ, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, hello. It's nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you. So my first question is always to give my guest an opportunity to introduce themselves to the listening audience in their own words and give us like a quick summary of who you are and what you do.
I'm MJ. I am the creator behind MJ Cullinane, the tarot cards and oracle cards. And I am a creator of those decks. I make tarot cards and I do readings, and I have an Instagram account where I post daily readings for the collective. I'm also the artist. That's basically it. I make decks.
Yeah, beautiful. Your artwork is so stunning. So I'll definitely link everything in the show notes so people have to go see all the work that you've done.
Thank you.
Originally, I started this podcast early on for like an audio support system for people who had, left their religion of origin or were on a spiritual journey and kind of trying to find their truth and their light and their path and stuff like that. So I've kept this question in because it's been actually kind of like a qualitative research of question of sorts to understand, where did you start out in your early life with religion or spirituality or nothing at all? And then like, where did you land as an adult and how were you shaped by that experience?
So I was raised Catholic. I'm from the East Coast. And so we're brought up Catholic. We were the loosey-goosey kind of Catholic kind of people where we went to church on, the holidays. And then I had to do CCD, which is like an after-school Catholic program. And I always felt really like a fish out of water. Like it just didn't fit right for me. There seemed to be a lot of hypocrisy between what I was being told, in class and then what I was seeing. And so anyway, that sort of opened, and that was at a young age. I mean, that was like before I was 14 because I made confirmation at 14. So even before that, it was like, this really is not for me. And I remember sitting there in class and I had the Patriot Ledger, which was our little paper in Massachusetts in Braintree. And I was reading my horoscope, and I just remember the priest coming up to me and telling me that I was going to go to hell.
Oh, geez.
As I was reading my horoscope. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound like a nice, loving God. I'm like, who is this God who is so threatened by a little piece of paper with some words on it? And so it just didn't sit right. And then I started to explore, and you go down the rabbit hole, through high school, of just exploring all different philosophies. I considered myself an atheist for a long time. And then I looked into Buddhism, and I just sort of explored a lot of different religions, trying to figure out what I like, where I belonged, right? Like what fit. And it's really one of those things where I think for everybody, it's a very individual journey. And for me, what I kind of gravitated towards was kind of a little bit of everything and a little bit of nothing. This is kind of like when I say like, I'm a witch, right? It's a little bit like that, where it is like, where I'm like, I believe magical forces. I believe I have the power to create change in my life. And I believe that spell work works. Just like people who are Christian believe in prayer, right? I mean, it's kind of very similar. So I kind of feel like it's all sort of woven together, where it's everything and nothing at the same time. Because I don't know if that even makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So I guess if I were to say now what religion I am, I would be like, I'm a follower of nature and energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Yeah, and I think it's always interesting to me too, after I got out of my own Catholic experience, how much is stolen from other religions and
Hmm.
paganism that has
Oh,
created the rituals in Catholicism. It's like, like,
I know, right? And then they'll be like, "Oh, you're a witch," or like they would consider you a heathen. But I was like,
uh-huh.
wait a minute, we do the exact same thing, you know?
I know, and they sort of appropriated a lot of Jewish rituals from
Hmm.
Judaism, and the rosary came from the Buddhist mala beads. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
After, when you're insulated in it, you're just kind of, there's not a lot of questioning, and there is a lot of that fear mongering. So,
Hmm.
so it's interesting to come out of that experience, I think, for anybody and just be like, well, I don't know about all of this after I realize
Right.
all this stuff
Right.
has been appropriated from other places to make this religion that just started like a couple weeks ago
Yeah.
in
Well,
terms of like all of time.
right, right. And it does seem like there are a lot of restrictions in place that are very self-serving for that
Oh,
religion, you know?
absolutely. Yeah. And it just as a means for control and power and
Hmm. Right.
influence and monetary gain. So, yeah, there's a lot there that we could just spend the whole time talking about.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Well,
Oh
very
yes.
cool. I like that. And I agree too with what you said back there about one of the things that we were definitely always made to fear horoscopes and curanderas, which because I'm of Hispanic
Hmm.
background, which are witches in Spanish, or well, those are called, they're actually healer. The literal term is healer, but they would consider them
Hmm.
witches. But I know
Right,
now
which
that
is
it is
funny.
the intention, right? It's the intention we're
Hmm.
putting behind something that moves
Hmm.
it magically, that changes the energy, that changes the way we sort of interact with what we're trying to sort of impact. And I think that's really cool that you said that.
Well, and then also, I mean, there is healing in herbs, and there is healing that is outside of traditional science. I mean, well, not traditional science, but traditional medicine, like
Mm-hmm.
chemicals. I mean, there's a lot we can learn from nature and the plants. And I think in combination with medical doctors, I think that there's so much more that we could do to increase our wellness that we don't, or that it's frowned upon,
Right. And
because
it's
it's
so
not, it's
readily
different.
available to us, which is
Yeah,
wild. I'm with you.
that's just
That's just us
that's
getting
another
on our
that's another
soapboxes.
conversation. I know, right? I'm like, let me get off that soapbox, right?
No, I'm with you. I'm with you 100% on that.
Yeah.
And you are an artist and an intuitive, and I really wanted to kind of position this next question for us to kind of unpack your life story and your life journey, and I wondered if you could walk us through the early part of your professional career, and then morphing into doing the tarot card artwork and other tarot related artistry
Mhm.
that has been sort of the lifeblood of your work now, that is really expansive. How did that all come to pass?
I don't know. I just feel really, really lucky that I found my purpose like at 50.
Mm-hmm.
Some people never find their purpose at all, and I'm just really grateful. It came a little late. When you sit in a place where you're like, this feels right, this feels comfortable, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, where it flows together easily and effortlessly, then it's like, oh, it's like a giant exhale. Like I've been
Mm-hmm.
holding my breath this whole time, just waiting. And so, but it started. I've always known I was an artist. Like I knew from like a very young age. And I've told the story before, but just to give you some context here, like when I was 5, I was my neighbor had called my mom, and I lived in this, like not like urban area. It's a congested area of just south of Boston. Anyway, I was like a little ways away from my house, and I was 5 years old, and I was selling my artwork door to door. And my mom got a phone call from the neighbor down the street, and she was like, "You need to come here and get Margot. She's selling her artwork," And my mom was just like mortified. But I always knew, like I kind of just knew, like this is what I'm supposed to do. Like this is where I'm supposed to be. And so that just evolved. I ended up going to art school, and then it became a reality that doesn't always pay the bills. So you have to take other jobs, and always keeping that dream, kind of in there alive, that someday it will happen. So, and then when an opportunity came up, it didn't necessarily look like an opportunity at the time, but I made my first deck, the Crow Tarot, and that was just life-changing. It was absolutely life-changing. This is like a whole long bit, of life between there. But basically at 50, the inspiration to create the deck hit me, and it was like, I need to make this. And it was through a horrible time of struggle. So I think that's, when we make our art, I always found the best art I make comes through difficulty, or when I'm stressed about something, or just when I have feelings that I just need to express.
Yeah. Yeah. And in regards to the difficulties, you do talk about that in your bio, that you sort of slipped into this point in your life that became really challenging and sort of was like a catalyst for other things. So I thought we would talk about what was that difficult time, if you're comfortable with sharing that with us. And then how were you able to overcome it, and then like energize your creativity and spirituality to like move forward in this moment that kind of brings us to the Crow Tarot, I think, right?
Yes. So because I've always had a knowing, like in my gut, that this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be an artist, right? Been my compass. It's been like that North Star that I've always had. Sometimes I feel like we get derailed, or we think that we're moving in the right direction, or we expect things to be perfect, on that journey.
Or
So
linear.
when they're or linear, like it's a linear trip. However, in life, there are actually, exits, that you have to get off and get back on. So there are turns in the road, so to speak. So I had this job working for a software company here in Seattle. It was like a smaller software company, and I was in sales and marketing. My dream while I was working at this job was to someday quit this job. Like I focused all my energy creating in my mind's eye a vision where I could take my child to school every day, walk her to school, not feel stressed for time. If I wanted to grab coffee with a friend, I didn't have to ask anybody, or say, hey, I'm leaving. I would just be able to leave. I feel like, I manifested that after being there a few years, and it was like the world opened up. I was like, oh my God, I started making jewelry, and people liked the jewelry initially. It was a way to be creative. It wasn't necessarily like I was getting to do art, but I was still being creative. And it was successful for about 6 months, where I was able to quit my job. And I was like, I'm living the dream, I'm like, I'm taking my kid to school, eking out a living, doing this. It wasn't like we were struggling at that time. But then 6 months in, it was like the floor just came out from under us. I would have days like where it was like I couldn't sell a single freaking bracelet. Days like where I would do the farmers market here in Seattle and Ballard. I didn't even have to pay for my cart cost because I made so little,
Right.
And it was like, and it's just me and my daughter, and I'm like responsible for this little person,
Yeah, that's
and
a lot of heaviness and
it's a lot of
responsibility.
stress.
A lot of
Oh
stress.
yeah. And there's a lot of shame where you're like, why can't I do this? What's wrong? And then I was like, I made a huge mistake. I should have just not quit my job. I should have just, suck up my pride and just, went in and give up this idea that I could, have this life of. But then, so I'm angry, right? So like, like life is like thrown me a curveball. The success that was initially given in the beginning is no longer there. All these feelings like really begin to surface, and it's just like, what the hell am I supposed to do? Like I was really angry. I mean, I spent some time just really being angry and confused that the universe would give me this chance and then take it away. And it's like, well, I take responsibility in that too. Maybe I wasn't clever enough, or I wasn't working hard enough, maybe I didn't have my vision
like
clear
self-blame.
enough.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, what's going on? Like maybe it wasn't the right opportunity. And I don't think actually it ever was the right opportunity, but it was the opportunity that I needed to get out of that job so that I could create the Crow Tarot. So, like sometimes when bad things happen, we're like, when we're in the moment, right? We're like, I can't, this is like, I'm never going to recover from this. Or you don't understand why it's so pivotal to your life. It really took a good 2 years before I go like, I'm actually kind of grateful for that experience, because had it not been for that experience, I probably would never have felt the stress or sent out that beacon to the universe to say, hey, I really need your help now. Like, this is not funny anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I need that burst of inspiration. Like, guides, if you've taken off on vacation, if you're gone, I'm like, I really need you to come back. I know you thought I was good on my own, but I'm really not. I think that, what happens is you have to learn lessons. And sometimes the lesson you learn isn't an easy one, and it comes in different pieces, and you may not realize it when you're in a difficult piece, that it's all part of a greater puzzle.
Yeah.
So.
And I think what I'm hearing as well is that it gave you a lot of insight into where your focus kind of needed to go, and that it's not about reward and punishment when we suffer in life. It's really about the ability to be able to get clarity about what's important to us, where our priorities are, and like where we want to sort of contribute to our life in really meaningful ways. And it sounds like you really got to that point through that experience, and you came out of it and were like, man, I've been through this thing, and I know I still am an artist. I know I still have to create, and here's this thing that lives in me. And then that's when the Crow Tarot was born, right?
Yeah, it was. And it is like that, where you just like, I could have gotten another job, I could have found an office job.
Yeah.
But it was like, it's not who I am. And I had to be true to myself. And, I gave myself a time limit though, because I'm also realistic.
Right.
And I also have a child.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
of course.
And it's like, so I was like, hey, I've got to get something to a point. Like I'm, like I have so many months here where we can kind of skate along, and push things off. But it has to happen. So that's when I went into the shower, and I was like, my kids at school, and I was like, what is going on? And I, it's like, I just need inspiration. I need something, right? And a friend gave me a tarot card deck because I'd always been interested in tarot. And at that time I had a couple of decks, but she gave me one that we both had seen at a store, and I liked the artwork, but I just couldn't figure out how to use the deck to help me. It wasn't really working for me. And I have a hard time, to learn things. I have to either write it out, like if I was in class, I would have to write a paragraph out to help me learn whatever it was that I was supposed to learn from that paragraph, or draw, or do sketch, or just kind of figure things out that way. Anyway, so I wanted to learn how to read tarot cards so I could help myself out here. Kind of put that as is an education under my belt. Like, oh, I've got this knowledge. I can use this maybe. That's when the Crow Tarot came out. Initially, I wasn't even thinking about making this as a deck that I would sell so much as a deck that I would use. And then maybe take it to the farmer's market, that kind of thing, make small printings of it. But when I posted it on Facebook, it was like, people are like, this is great. Oh my God, where are you selling this? Are you getting this published? What's doing, it's like, I was like, oh, I get it. This is what I'm supposed to do. Okay. What was so hard before with the jewelry is all of a sudden, the doors opened up, and I had somebody say, oh, you should reach out to US Games. And I had only had a few cards done at this point, and show them the artwork. Maybe they'd be interested in it. I sent an email, not even expecting to hear anything back. I was just like, all right, fine. I'll just send it off with a picture of the Hermit card. Within a few hours, I got an email back, a note saying, we would love to publish your deck. And there was a contract attached to it. And I was like, what? Oh my God, this is it. And so it felt right,
Yeah.
when you're on the right, you're moving in the right direction. And then even that didn't, I wasn't 100% sold that this was my path. I was like, all right, well, the universe, you pulled the rug out from under me before, So I kind of was a little bit more tentative. I was like, oh, okay, we're going to do this, but we'll see how it goes. But I've always got to maybe there's something else out there that this is just a fluke.
There's a plan B potentially if this one's not going to work out. You just,
right.
Planning for something else. That I think that's sensible.
But then when I made the Wise Dog, and then it really wasn't until the Guardian of the Night deck that I felt very secure in what I was doing. So I made the Grimalkin in between there too. And that one was very successful because people love cats. But the Guardian of the Night one was really the first deck since the Crow Tarot where I felt in control. I've got this. I can
Yeah.
do this. This is now I see the path. Like I can actually see where I'm going,
That's beautiful.
you know.
Can we tell the audience what tarot cards
Sure.
are and how they're used and what their purpose might be for somebody to use them?
Yeah, of course. Tarot cards, there's 78 cards, and in that deck of cards, there's a major arcana and a minor arcana. And the major arcana are the first 22 cards that hold like the big life stuff, like big life events. And then the other cards, the minor arcana, are, there to kind of help guide you along the little stuff. So when you use a tarot card deck, people pull just one card. Sometimes they do like 3-card spreads. The idea is to look at the cards, and each card with a tarot deck has an energy that is assigned to that card. So if you're holding the Fool card, right, for example, the first card there, the energy is going to feel very different than, say, the Devil card. And how you read or interpret it is, it really goes to the reader or the person who is being read, but it's all about understanding the various energy that is held in that deck to help you kind of sort out any problems that you may be experiencing or questions that you might have, or usually it's just to help you kind of get over a block. So like that's different than like an oracle card deck, which has like an undetermined number of cards and in which the artist creates the meanings. So with a tarot card deck, you're always going to have, some variation of the Fool or the Emperor, the Magician, the suits. You're always going to have the 4 suits, whereas with an oracle card deck, it's much more variable,
Yeah, I
as
think it's
far as
good
the
to make
energy
that
goes.
distinction because I think
Yeah.
I don't even know if I knew that distinction myself. I know I have a deck of oracle cards, but I definitely don't own a tarot card deck, so I don't know if I would have known that difference there.
For me, at least what I tell people for doing a reading, a tarot card deck is not going to tell you if you're going to meet the love of your life, or
Yeah.
it's not going to tell you if you're going to lose your job. What it is going to tell you is, do you have and are you attracting any energy that would open yourself up to this experience? Or are you kind of giving off the vibe? Will attract that. Are you open to it? And it will also help you figure out if you're creating blocks, or are there seeds that have been planted maybe as a child that are creating, areas of friction in your life, where if you have any, I don't know, shame around this or that, it will surface in a tarot reading. If you're worried about something, it will come up in a tarot reading, and it's just a nice exercise to kind of dive in deep and figure out where you might be hosing yourself.
Right. Yeah. So my next question was the thing I think that's really beautiful about the work that you do is it's equal parts creativity, artistry, and spirituality. And I think when those 3 things collide, it's really beautiful. And so I wondered if you would want to walk us through your creative process and how you are also using nature to connect in the work that you create for the collective.
Oh yeah. Well, for right now, like I'm working on my latest deck, which is the Forhaxa deck. For each card, I think about the energy that the possesses, right? Because that's my number one goal is to make sure that the person who holds that card really gets it. Like they understand the message. And so right now I'm working on, which card am I working on? The 5 of Cups. So I think about this. I go for walks, and it'll take me sometimes at least a day. I mean, like at the minimum, it's a day to make the card, because there's that time that I have to go and think about the energy, sit with it for a little bit, think about the person who might be reading the deck,
Yeah.
and what feelings surface when they're looking at that card. And then I go outside, because a lot of my artwork is nature based. I'll walk around, or if I'm out in the woods, or if we're on vacation somewhere, and I try to take a conscious look at the environment, like what plants are sticking out, what flowers do I notice, is there anything around me that I'm particularly picking up? And then I kind of take that. Sometimes I take pictures of it. So my neighbors are probably like, who is this crazy person like taking all these weird pictures? Because you'll see me walking through like the city. I'm like, oh my, look at that flower. That one's really interesting. I wonder where I can use that one. I kind of just let that energy sit. So when I'm taking my dog for a walk and it's in between while I'm working on this card, I really just think about stories that go along with it, maybe experiences from my own life where I've experienced the energy or that feeling that comes from that card, the story that I want to tell in the guidebook. I kind of like to craft the story around this idea and then illustrate that story. So yeah, there is this kind of combination of everything, but really it's like most important is I want people when they hold the cards to feel the energy. I want it to feel electric.
Yeah.
With my decks.
Yeah, I
Like there's
love that.
no doubt.
Yeah, that seems like a very intricate process and with so much intention and mindfulness and tuning in, and I really love that you do that. That is incredible. I'm kind of blown away by how you described all of that right now.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, it's just part of the process. It's like if you're making a cake, right? And you think about like all the ingredients that go into making a cake, it's just like that. I just think of all the
Yeah.
ingredients that go into making a card.
It's really beautiful. And I love that you're thinking about the people picking up the card.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I have the
really
best
beautiful.
followers. I really do. I'm not kidding you. I think I have the best followers on Instagram and Facebook because they're so engaged and they'll tell me like their personal stories and how that card relates with them. And I'm like, great. I'm like, I knocked this one out of the park. I got it. Like I got the energy right for this one.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of your followers, I think you do a regular reading for the collective. I watched the one that you did for this week. I wondered when you're doing a reading for the collective, because to me that seems kind of like a lot, like you're reading for everybody, but
Yeah.
you're definitely tuning into like collective energy. And so I wondered if we might sort of like break down reading for the collective and how much people find resonance, and if they don't, what should they do in that moment? Like, is there any like other steps they can take if they're not sort of aligning with whatever is being pulled for the collective?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think when I think about like doing a reading for the collective, it's like doing a weather forecast,
Okay.
And so
That's
what the
cute.
weather what the weather forecast for here in Seattle, right, might be today sunny and warm, but it might be rainy somewhere else. But eventually you're going to get that sunny and warm energy. You're going to get that sunny and warm weather. So I kind of look at it that way. I'm like, if you're not feeling it right now, it's coming, you might just be a day out, just like the weather can be like a day away. So that's how I see that. But also when I do a reading for the collective, it's like not everything is going to resonate. However, you can always find things that resonate with you in some way, and sometimes I have people who are like, wow, this one, I don't know, you're in my head, spot on, right? And then other people are like, yeah, this one I didn't get it today, but they'll get it tomorrow. The reading for them might be more relatable. But I think there's a little something for everyone. And I try not to be too specific, it's like,
Yeah.
I just basically say what the energy is that comes through the cards at that time. And then if somebody is picking up on that energy, if they're tuning in as well, then they may feel it more strongly. Just like, like sometimes I look at other people's readings and I'm like, oh, I get that part, I might get part of it, but not everything applies.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes when we're going to those things, especially people who are spiritual, we're just a lot more open to kind of readings and decks and numbers, numerology, sacred geometry. Like we're trying to bring in all of the things essentially, and it's also good for us to like remember that we don't even have to back ourselves into those things, right? Like if, like you're saying, if it's not necessarily feeling you, I think, because sometimes we can feel like, well, this doesn't make sense for what's going on in my life. Well, maybe not today, which is like what you said, and I think that that's really beautiful.
Yeah, it might be something where it could even be just a small portion of it where it really does click. And really what my goal like with doing these is to add a little bit of positivity, maybe make a situation that may be difficult, help people see another perspective, or see their situation from another angle, maybe offer some insight, where they may already know. Like what I find with a tarot card reading, half the time I already know this information, but I just don't want to accept it, or I don't want to have to deal with it in a way where having a tarot card reading comes up in a card that you like, oh God, please don't show up. And that one shows up. You're like, oh, fine, I'll deal with this problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny. I think a lot of people feel like that sometimes too. The other thing I just recently told somebody on another podcast who's an intuitive is like, I think that a lot of times because we're sort of creating our own reality and our energy is sort of mapping out the world in front of us, sometimes we don't really learn anything new because we already are thinking it all the time. And we're hoping for something different, and really sometimes the nuance there is that we have to get honest with ourselves. We have to be truthful about what's going on inside and say, if you're hoping to find the love of your life, let's just say, for example, but you're not necessarily taking any actionable steps to sort of put yourself out there, or whatever, if you're in some way sabotaging yourself, and then a card comes up and it's like, you're not going to meet anyone yet, then it's like just another affirmation, because that's kind of the energy there is blocking the intention. And I think that that's something that's always really interesting to kind of think about.
Yeah, and it is totally true. I find too, like with the tarot, like especially, well, my Crow tarot deck is, to be brutally honest, it's like one of those things where you're like, oh, I want change, I want change, I want change. But then you spend all day like vegging out, watching Netflix. It's like,
yeah.
Like, but why aren't I having change? And the devil will show up or something like that, and you're like, it's like, it's like it's because you're falling into a pattern that might not be so healthy. But yeah, but there's like all sorts of blocks. Like if you're looking for a relationship, but you won't get yourself out of sweatpants, and you're staying on the couch all night, you're not getting out, you're not even going out, it's really hard to find somebody. And I think that's where the cards will give you that dose of reality in the sense, like they're almost like a good friend, in that they'll tell you sometimes what we don't they'll tell you the truth, whereas it's easier, I think, to accept it when it comes from like a card.
An objective source that isn't intertwined with all the stuff that you're going through. Yeah, I agree.
Yes. And it's not going to say it in a way that could be like hurtful, like like the friend that says something, they're being very brutally honest, And you're like, oh, why would you say that? But you can, when you read a card, it can come off a bit softer too. Like the message is still there.
Yeah, there's still compassion and understanding there in the work. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful.
Well, and I think it's also your higher self coming through and saying like, hey, it's like, it's like a loving communication or a loving conversation with your higher self, in which they're like, hey, you really need to get up off the couch. It's time to take off the slippers, maybe put on some pants with a belt, or like with a waistline.
Yeah. I love that. I love the idea of that. And maybe since we have access to, energy outside of time and space, maybe it is our highest self coming to visit us.
I definitely feel like that. Like I feel like that's all the decks are, like the decks are our higher self coming through, and kind of, we already, like you said, we already know all this information, right? I mean, like we have it all available to us. It's just tapping into it. That's why I know, like, there are people who are terrified of Ouija boards. I'm not afraid of Ouija boards because I feel it's just our higher self coming through, telling us the information that we know is already there. We already know the answer, but we're just
I always just used to push it, so I never really trusted it, because I was.
Did you?
Yes, I always used to be that kid that would be pushing the little thing, because I just didn't believe it.
Yeah, I don't believe it. I mean, it told me I was gonna die at, was it 38 when I was a kid? You're like, when you're always like, when am I gonna die? And like at that time, I think 38 seemed like a century away.
But was that during your difficult stretch?
No, when I was. No,
because I was gonna say maybe you did die. You had a rebirth after your after your difficult time.
Holy crap! I didn't even think of it that way. No, but I did have a huge life shift at 38. I mean, like that's when I got pregnant with my daughter, and my husband, and like we like.
Dun, 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 dun.
Nuts. I didn't even think about that. I did, like, a part of my life did die.
Yeah. A new iteration was born, literally.
Right. So maybe the Ouija board wasn't lying. Maybe I just didn't look at it in the right perspective.
Yeah.
There we go.
Full circle there on the oracle deck.
Full circle. Wow.
Yeah.
That's nuts. Yeah. Okay. So then, I guess I died a third day. Awesome.
I think we have multiple deaths in our life that help wake us up and get us back to the fullness of who we are. I think that's the spiritual experience in a nutshell.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I say, like, like how people are like, they have multiple, like, each life there's like a different chapter. I'm like, I don't have chapters. I have full on books that are comprised of chapters, like, right, where it's
like Lord of the Rings or something.
Yes, or Harry Potter. Yes, it's like,
or Harry Potter,
where it's like where you can actually feel that definitive death, of each life, and you go, oh, that was
agree. The other thing is that when we touched base with your team about talking to you, they mentioned that you have an oracle deck called Roar that's coming out. And I don't know if it did come out or it's coming out. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, no, it came out and then it sold out, and now I'm on the second print.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. So what is the first deck about? And then what was the inspiration for this deck, and how are you hoping it's going to help people intuit and be guided by those cards?
So the Roar deck is an oracle deck. So this one has 54 cards.
Okay.
And it's part history lesson, part divination. So it's all women. These are like rebel rousers. These are women who made change, who we might not necessarily know, we definitely weren't taught in school, like at least not where I'm from. We were never taught. Half of the women in this deck. I wanted to create a deck. This was when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. It was just like, I was just shocked.
I think we were all devastated.
And she was such a strong, positive voice for women, and and for equal rights, and just for modern thinking. And so when she passed away, I was that with the freaking pandemic and my kid being home from school, it was just like I was feeling very sad, and kind of just, when you just like want to shout, and you're just like I just like things have got to change, and so I was like, oh, I want to make a deck that features women. And I was also thinking about my own daughter, how it'd be nice if she was taught more about women of various areas. I feel like at school they did a whole series on women, like in STEM, or in science, but they don't talk about women in other areas either. It was just like they were very isolating in where they were talking about women in history. So I thought, well, I'm going to make a deck and have it be a little bit more broad, so you have everybody from Frida Kahlo in there, who everybody knows, to Ida Lewis, to Granny Nanny, to Audre Lorde, and Octavia Butler, who was living up here in Seattle before she passed, just north of us in Lake Forest Park. There's Toy Perina. There's all sorts of people in this deck who I think we may, Billie Holiday, like a lot of people know who Billie Holiday is, but, they might not know who Mary Fields was, or Mary Coffin Ware Dennett. So I wanted to make a deck where you could reach out to these people who have passed on, who lived extraordinary lives, who made an impact in the world. Like the world is forever changed because of their contribution. Use this deck as like an advisory board, or a council, or like sometimes I'll be like with morning coffee, I'm like, hey, who wants to come through? Who do I need to have their energy with today? Like who's going to help me, through a difficult time. So to me, it's like having coffee with a friend, and I'll sit with the card and I'll look at the card. I'm like, hey, what lesson do you have for me? Is there something that I'm not picking up on right now, myself? Is there some wisdom that you can share? And what I tend to find is that even it doesn't matter the situation, they always have something important to say.
Yeah. And I love that you said that they're like an advisory board, because sometimes I think like in my life along my journey, there have been, I guess we can consider them like celebrity writers or spiritual teachers or whatever, who I feel like have been integral teachers in my life, who I have literally followed their steps to help me get to the other side of my journey. And I think, Ginsburg and Octavia Butler and those other women too, like, I feel like they are kind of somebody I could really use good advice from in making life decisions or trying to figure out, how we're going to navigate continuing to push a female first agenda that really needs to continue to perpetuate in this very Abrahamic and patriarchal society that we live in. And I love that you said that they're like an advisory board, because I think that in many ways, I feel like we've all kind of collected our own advisory boards through our own teachers, that are teaching us how to be strong women in this world that is asking us really not to be.
Oh, right. I know. Or they give you mixed signals,
Exactly.
It's like you're supposed to be strong, but you're also not supposed to make as much money. Or you're also supposed to be the one who takes care of the kids, right?
Oh, don't even get me started on that. I don't even have kids, but I think nothing bothers me more than how we haven't centered the mother in this culture yet.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, we can literally give birth. With the Roar deck, though, it is all women, and it's women through the ages. And there's just so many lessons in here that there's something, I think, for everybody. That was what I wanted, was to create a deck where even if you're not into divination, which I can't imagine why somebody wouldn't be. It's just like, I mean, it's awesome. But you would find something of value where you might have a lesson, or you might find that you connect with an energy of somebody, or you might learn something new, or that you didn't know. And I have a quote from each person in the deck, or in the guidebook. And so there's just a lot of opportunities here to find somebody who you might connect with personally, where you go, like, that could be my mentor, or maybe I want to learn more about this person, which I found myself going down a lot of rabbit holes when I was researching this deck. I watched a documentary about Queen Nanny that was just absolutely fascinating. This woman in Jamaica who freed the slaves there, and she taught this like older woman, frail like woman, was teaching men guerrilla warfare and talking about being a healer. She was also a spiritual healer and used the herbs in the plant life of Jamaica to heal people. And they thought she was a witch. A lot of men also, I found in this deck, when I was researching this deck, the men would refer to a lot of the women in this deck as witches, because they just couldn't understand how they could be so powerful, or why they survived, or, like how they were able to get support from so many other people. They're like, oh, well, they must be witches, which I think is really funny. I feel like that's like a default for men when they don't understand.
It's a very stereotype.
Yeah, right. It's also, it's very like, it's like the hysterical argument, like when people don't understand something, they're like, oh, they must be a witch.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I agree with that. So wrapping up here towards the end of the interview, I did want to give you the opportunity to maybe share with the collective any advice or words of wisdom, or if you want to pull a card, I don't know, whatever you want to end off on. Yeah, sure. Whatever you want to end off. Yeah, whatever you want to end off here to give them a little help on their journey.
Okay, well, I'm going to pull a card from the Guardian of the Night deck, because I have that in front of me. And that's the one I was using earlier today. Give me a number between 1 and 10.
3.
The 7 of Swords. And this card is this Black Panther, and he's sitting there by himself, separated from the other panthers. And he's holding onto a sword with his big paw, and it's his sword. And this is about being like a lone wolf, being an island and doing things for yourself, and not necessarily trusting other people to do something for you. And this energy is just one where you feel like it's better if you just do something yourself, like be alone. There's positives and minuses to that, right? Sometimes you have to do something yourself. Like sometimes you have the wit, the cleverness, the ability to see what needs to be done. And sometimes it's better to just go at it, But you also jeopardize being seen in a negative light. You jeopardize that perception, that you don't play well with others. So that's just something to consider with this one. So yeah, I just, as far as the wisdom goes with this, is just know that you have the ability to handle a situation, that you have that ability to find the clear path, to find the solution, and that you might not need other people, but you also need to be able to work with other people. And so how you communicate is really important. And it's always better to use honey than vinegar.
Yeah.
But yeah. So like for this card, as far as like if I were to do this like in a reading, I would ask the person, like, what are they thinking about? Like, are they concerned with how other people are going to let them down? Are you afraid that you aren't going to get the support? And because of that, you feel this almost anxiety or stress to handle everything yourself. Like you're not comfortable with letting go of control. So that would be the card for today for your readers, or not your readers, sorry, for your listeners. Oh my God.
No worries.
So as far as like word of advice, try to find the good in everything. Try to find the positive message if you can. And even something that looks like it could be a negative, there's always a way to find a benefit. Something will help you in the end. So even if it's something where you might feel like, oh, well, God, I didn't want to get this tower card today. Well, there might be positive change on the horizon, or it might, there might be something that will be beneficial when it comes through. So there's always a positive lesson. It may not feel like it at the time.
It's just that rebirth. That's all it is. Death and rebirth.
Yep. And it's like, and sometimes you have to cut the cord, and like I find doing like that exercise very helpful, the cord cutting.
Yeah.
Where when you're in a state where you're just like, I've got to just let it go. Like I do a mental cord cutting, and it's amazing how transformative that can be.
Yeah. I like to end the podcast and give you the opportunity to tell everybody verbally how they can connect with you on social media or online.
Oh, yes. I am on Instagram. I am Crow Tarot MJ Cullinane on Instagram. I'm on Facebook with the same name. You can find my deck at thecrowtarotshop.com. You can also learn more about the decks at mjcullinane.com.
Well, and the last question is to just wrap up on a high note and just touch in with you and see what 3 things are you grateful for in this moment.
Oh, at this moment. Well, I'm grateful for this opportunity. Like I'm always grateful to chat about my work. So for that, I'm very grateful. So thank you, Krista. Grateful that my child is in school right now. I'm grateful that she's actually in front of a teacher and not remote. And I'm grateful for that time. But I'm grateful for the place that I'm in this position to be able to connect with people and to have an opportunity to help people through the readings. Like I'm really grateful for that. And to have support for my artwork, because I think I don't take that very lightly. I take it very seriously that I'm able to make art, and it's only because people support my artwork. And I'm not in an office right now in air conditioning. I'm very grateful for that.
This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, your host, Krista Xiomara, in alignment with LightCasting. Music curated and created by Mr. Pixie. You can find I'm Awake Now What on all social media channels by searching IANW Podcast. Head over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe, download, rate, and review. Come back every Sunday to partake in a new and enlightening conversation. May you be filled with love and light until we meet again.